Hey, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is Ninja Turtles. Now, I don't have a huge Ninja Turtle collection, and I'm not a diehard fan, so this isn't going to cover, all the different Ninja Turtle figures or anything. This is just going to cover the Ninja Turtles in my collection. So yeah, if you're looking for an in-depth background on all things Ninja Turtles, you're better off finding a different video or going to Wikipedia or something like that. I am a Turtles fan, but I did find it kind of late in my childhood. So I'm not as attached to it as I am with, say, G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, Masters of the Universe, things like that. But, I was still just 10 when I discovered Ninja Turtles, so I did have a few years where I was really into it, because when Turtles hit the mainstream, they hit big time. So, Ninja Turtles, they first came out, they were created by these two independent comic creators, Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman, and they created these guys back in 1984, and that was still years before I was collecting comic books. I was born in 78, so I was still really little in 84. I started collecting comic books in 86. That's when I first discovered Marvel Comics, and I started buying Spider-Man on the regular. And I had no idea about Ninja Turtles. I know those original comics published by Eastman and Laird were popular, but they were still underground. They were published through Eastman and Laird's own publishing company called Mirage. So it wasn't, Marvel or DC or even some of the other larger small companies like Dark Horse. So I honestly don't know if my comic shop even carried those old Ninja Turtle comic books way up here in Eastern Canada. So I didn't hear about Ninja Turtles, even though I was a comic fan, until the rest of the world heard about Ninja Turtles. They really hit the big time in 87 is when it really came to be. Eastman and Laird, even though they've been published these independent comic books for about a decade. It went from 84 right up to 95. Then Image Comics took over the comics rights for a while, and they continued to publish the comics. And then Mirage picked it up again from 2001 until 2010. So, indie comic book aside, it was when Eastman and Laird reached out to some marketing people and decided to license out the Ninja Turtles that the cartoon hit and the toy line from Playmates hit, and along with their kind of darker themed comic books, Archie Comics had the rights to publish a comic book called Ninja Turtle Adventures, which was based on the animated series, which was a lot less kind of hardcore than Eastman and Laird's original comic books. Because if you're a casual fan, you might not realize that the original Turtles books were pretty dark. They were black and white for one thing, and they were really inspired by Frank Miller's artwork in books like Ronin and probably most prominently Daredevil. So think Frank Miller's Sin City. That's kind of what the Turtles were like back then. They even had some pretty obvious crossovers with Daredevil, even though there was no official relationship. But it was said that the ooze that the Turtles stumble across in the sewer, which is what mutates them, that was the same canister of ooze that supposedly blinded Daredevil and gave him his superpowers. Because if you know Daredevil's origin, he pushed a guy out of the way of a speeding truck. The truck splashed radioactive chemicals on his face, and this canister rolled into the sewer. And Eastman and Laird picked up on that, and they kind of said that transformed the Turtles. The other most obvious tie is Daredevil always fought a ninja clan known as the Hand, and in Ninja Turtles, as you're probably aware, they fight a ninja clan known as the Foot. So yeah, that's what was going on in the dark comic books, but Archie published these nice, kid-friendly, lighthearted comic books. So this was the first comic Archie published in 88, and you can tell just by the cover. So here's issue 1, there's issue 2. It's got kind of this painted, semi-realistic style. They were still kind of, even though the interiors were pretty cartoony, at least on the covers, they were still trying to stick to the aesthetic of the original comic books. But then you'll see here, I've got like by issue 5, they had fully embraced the look of the cartoon, and everything was pretty bright and colorful by that point in time. So yeah, so when the Archie comics came out, that's when I first discovered them. I actually don't recall if I saw the cartoon before the comic book. In my mind, I got the comic book first, but the cartoon did actually start airing before the comic book hit. So, but I think it was all within a matter of a few months. So the cartoon, the comic book, and the first toy line from Playmates. So those all kind of hit all at once. And I remember in the time before the toy line hit, once we started reading the comic book and maybe watching the show, me and my older brother Doug, we really wanted Ninja Turtle toys because we were huge toy guys. You know, we had huge collections of of Transformers, G.I. Joe, all the other stuff. So when we fell in love with Turtles, we wanted to play with them. So we did the same thing with them that we did with Marvel heroes. Because back when I was a little kid, you couldn't get Marvel figures. There was a few of them floating around out there, but definitely not a very expansive collection. So me and Doug would make our toys out of paper. So with Ninja Turtles, what we did is we made, their figures are probably about yay big, but we would draw the head and torso on a piece of paper, and then we draw the arms and legs on a separate piece of paper, and we put in that kind of like that butterfly pin, you punch it through and you fold the sides out, so then the arms and legs could kind of spin. They were, kind of flat, and they moved only like this. But that's what we had, and we were able to make pretty much any character that appeared in the comic book or cartoon. So we had some of those characters years before they actually got made into figures, or some of them maybe never did get made into figures. Another thing we did is we made little paper cities. So again, we'd lay a piece of paper flat, we'd draw roads and bushes and stuff on it, and then we'd make buildings and draw buildings and stand them up. Sometimes you'd have to put a little piece of cardboard to prop up the back. And then we'd draw all the little turtle characters about this big, and we would just make a little display base that you fold half forward and half backwards, and we'd have these little turtles in this whole city, so that way we could make all kinds of different dioramas. So we had like the sewer play set, and we had a cityscape, and I think we had the Technodrome, and we had a bunch of environments. So yeah, we're creative kids, and that's what we did before Playmates toys finally hit. So I don't have a ton of Playmates figures from the vintage line, but that's the first thing I'm going to show you, and then we'll go through right up to the most recent figures, which I just got, which is what prompted me to do this video. So I've got these brand new turtle figures from Neca that I haven't even opened up yet, and I've been sitting on them for like a week waiting to do this video. So I'm excited to get these opened up. So yeah, let's start with some vintage Ninja Turtles. So here you can see the very first Ninja Turtle figures ever released. So these were put out by Playmates in 1988. So you can see I've got all 4 guys here. Now my favorite turtle is Leonardo. So the leader, I like his swords, I like the blue outfit. It was a combination of things that made me like Leo the best. I just kind of like his personality, I guess. And my my second favorite was Donatello. And of the original figures, Donatello is my favorite figure. And the main thing that puts him over the top is the face. You'll notice each of these guys do have unique head sculpts. Playmates could have cheaped out and just given us, repaints of the exact same figure. But they didn't. They actually have some different sculpted parts, and they all have different paint jobs. And it's not just different color masks, but different color skin tones. You can see all 4 of the turtles have a different shade of green. But as far as their head sculpts go, so Mikey and Leo each have their mouth kind of closed in the middle with their teeth showing on one side. Raph's got a full scowl. And then Donatello, he's got the mouth closed in the middle, but he's got the teeth showing on both sides. And that just happens to be my favorite look for these guys. Now each of these guys came with a bunch of weapons. I only have them displayed with their main weapons here. So just the bow staff. And that fits in the back of his web gear here. It just slides down in there. Their web gear, you'll notice, is all a little different too. He's got the dual straps, where those, as does Leo. these guys don't have the straps. Raph has the little spots for his sais to fit in the front, as well as he came with another knife that can fit in the back there, like a big bladed weapon. Mikey's got his nunchucks. I've only got one in his hands there, and the other one kind of tucked away. And you can see how they could both be displayed in there. So yeah, the weapons they came in like what we call kind of a weapons tree. There's all these weapons. They were all solid brown, whether it was a blade or wood or whatever. And you kind of had to punch them all out, so they all came together in a square of all these little weapons. So they came with throwing stars, different size blades. Like Leo, you'll see I've got him holding one of his longer swords and short swords, and then 2 more swords in the back there. Now, Leo and Donnie, these are my vintage figures that I had when I was a kid. So these are the originals. Now, with any major toy line that me and my brother collected and played with together, we always had to split them down the middle. So it did kind of suck when I moved out on my own and kind of became an adult toy collector, and I was a huge fan of all these properties. I was missing key characters from every single toy line because Doug owned half the G.I. Joes and half the Transformers and half the Ninja Turtles. So while Donnie and Leo were my favorites, my brother Doug, he had Mikey and Raph. So I didn't have those figures. But fortunately, a couple of years ago, maybe 2012 or something, I used to do, rather than do these videos, I used to do a blog online where I just wrote about action figures. And one day, somebody that reads my blog, some guy I'd never met before, and he wasn't even somebody that commented on posts or anything. I had no idea who he was. He just reached out to me and he said, I really like your blog, and you seem to really love toys. I've got a whole bunch of toys that I was just going to get rid of. If you want, I'll send them to you. And he lived a couple of provinces over. He was in Montreal, and he put these things in a big box and put it on a train that I had to go pick up from the train station. And it was mostly G.I. Joes. He gave me hundreds of vintage G.I. Joe figures, some vintage Transformers, and there was also some Turtles mixed in there. So that's where I got my vintage versions of Mikey and Raph. So yeah, these figures here, they're all pretty much the same as far as articulation goes. So you can see there they spin at the elbow, but it doesn't bend. There's nothing at the knee or the ankle, so they just move a little bit there at the thigh. Arms go up and down, head side to side. And yeah, that's about it. But that's all we really needed. I thought these were pretty great figures, and I still think they hold up quite nicely. So those are my vintage Playmate Turtles. Now this here is the rest of my vintage Playmates collection. So you can see I don't have a whole lot. I only have 8 of them in total. And this toy line ran from 88 until well into the 90s. I think maybe even a full 10 years into 98 or so. And they made, I really don't know, I could say dozens, but it might have even been a couple hundred figures. Because not only was there a bunch of different characters like these guys you see in front of you, but there was also so many variations of the Ninja Turtles, which is partly what turned me off the line so quickly. You know, the problem with a toy line like Turtles and Batman is you only have, 1 or 4 heroes, and then you just have to keep making new versions of those guys. So that's why when the Batman toy lines of the 80s and 90s had Arctic Batman and Neon Batman and Skydive Batman and all that sort of stuff. But the Turtles were even more ridiculous because you got the Turtles dressed up as Universal monsters and the Turtles dressed up as Star Trek characters. Like, I don't know what kid would want, a Leonardo dressed up as Mr. Spock, especially if that was the only Ninja Turtle, they had in their collection trying to fight off the bad guys. It just didn't make any sense to me. I would have rather them see them release just maybe new versions of the Turtles with new weapons, maybe some different paint jobs. But yeah, they just went too far into the weird and wacky, and it just didn't interest me. So I stopped buying Turtles after the first couple of years. But you'll see here the guys I have here. So Casey Jones, which this is a pretty cool looking figure. I still think that hockey mask looks great. My only problem with this figure is I didn't like the human characters being the same size as the Turtles. I always felt the Turtles should have been smaller. That's kind of the way they were portrayed in most of the media, especially like if you look at the live action movie. So yeah, I just don't like Casey Jones being this small. This guy here, Mondo Gecko. So this is a skateboarding gecko. So this is the one I had when I was a kid. I held on to this guy. And I still do have his skateboard accessory. It's just kind of tucked away somewhere right now. But this guy's pretty great. Like the turtles, the articulation's pretty limited. His arms don't move at all at the elbows. Not even the swivel that the turtles had. Nothing moves at the wrist or the knees or anything. So it's really just at the shoulders and at the thighs. There's no spin at the waist. And his head turns. So you can't do anything too dynamic with these toys. But the sculpting was really nice. And sometimes you can't even tell how nice the sculpting is because they didn't paint all the details. Like you'll see here, he's got a roller skate along with some dust on him. He's got a roller skate strapped to the back of his tail. So when he's on a skateboard, his tail can wheel along too, which is a really cool and cute little detail. But, they didn't paint the wheels or they didn't paint the rope or anything like that. And you find that a lot on these turtle figures. So you really kind of have to look them over to appreciate the details. You'll see he's got braces on his teeth. They are painted. But, that's just another one of those cool little details. Then you've got Krang. This is the only villain I have from the vintage line. So this was like the evil brain character. And so there's not much to him. His tentacles move up and down. And then he came with this little, I guess his little body that allowed him to move around. I actually don't know if I think this came with a couple of weapon accessories, a couple arms, and maybe some tubing. I think I have all that stuff, but I don't remember for sure. And then I've got Usagi Yojimbo, which is a samurai rabbit character. And other than the turtles, this was my favorite figure from the vintage line. So I kept this one as well. This is my childhood Usagi Yojimbo. And I still think this looks fantastic. I love the look of this guy. Just looks super cool. And I actually had a bunch more vintage Ninja Turtle figures, but I got rid of most of them somewhere in my tweens or teens when I was purging a good chunk of my collection. And like I said, I just didn't have the nostalgic ties to Turtles that I did for some of the other toy lines. So I didn't feel the need to keep them all. Like I had Shredder. I had a bunch of the other mutants. But I unfortunately just kept what I thought were my favorites. So Leo, Donnie, Gecko, Usagi Yojimbo. And that was it. My favorite turtle character of all time was Bebop. And I had that vintage figure, but I didn't hold on to it. I don't know why. I guess maybe the figure didn't quite capture the look I wanted him to. He didn't look quite enough like the cartoon, but it was still a pretty good figure, and I should have held on to it. And as far as Casey and Krang goes, I got them in the same box that I got my Michelangelo and my Raphael in. So this guy came with a golf bag full of baseball bats and golf clubs. So all the accessories were provided, so I do have those somewhere as well. But yeah, so there you go. These are the last of the vintage Playmate figures that I have, and I think they're all pretty cool. Now here is my next set of Ninja Turtle figures. So these guys I got quite some time after those original ones, because I only bought Turtle figures for maybe the first 2 or 3 years of the original line. So we're talking 88, 89, 90, and that was probably around when it ended. One thing I forgot to mention about the vintage line is I think the first toy I bought with my own money, like besides maybe an individual figure, but was the original Turtle van. I remember I had a paper route then, and that Turtle van was like $25, and it seemed very expensive. But yeah, I remember going out and buying that Turtle van, and I was very, very pleased with myself to be able to buy that vintage van with my own money. Anyway, so this line here, this is still produced by Playmates, and it was based on a new 2012 animated series that was produced by Nickelodeon. And there had been multiple Turtle kind of reboots. Playmates was always making the figures, but they made the figures based on the live action movies and like the live action TV series. And yeah, I just really wasn't interested in anything Turtles until these guys came along. And to be honest, I never watched this series that these were based on. I just really wasn't that interested, but I thought the looks of the Turtles looked really cool. I really loved how the Turtles' eyes were like all whited out. I love the bandages wrapped around the hands and the feet. And I just really like the stylized look of them. Now these guys here are more posable than their vintage counterparts. You can see they got these ball jointed shoulders. There's lots of movement there. They turn and have ball joints there on the elbow. They swivel at the wrist. They bend at the knee, and again there's more posability there at the thigh and the head as well. So lots of movement, and like the vintage figure, they had room on their web gear to store all their weapons. And yeah, just visually, I like these turtles even more than the vintage ones. I just think they are really cool. Like the vintage ones too, they all have their own shade of green. They don't necessarily match up with the vintage ones. And another thing I really like is that they're different heights. So you'll see Michelangelo is a fair amount shorter than the other ones, and Donatello is a bit taller. And the variety in the facial expressions is a little greater this time too. So he's got a nice little sneer going. Mikey looks, he's almost like he's smiling. Donatello's got a very serious, pensive look on his face. And then Raph just looks angry as he does. So again, you can see on the back of his web gear, he's got somewhere to hold his size, and Donnie's got a place to hold his bow staff again. And yeah, I was really excited about this toy line. I was thinking, if this keeps up at this quality, I'm very likely going to buy, new versions of all the characters that I loved as a kid. So Bebop, Rocksteady, Baxter Stockman, Shredder. And for a while I was buying a few of them, but I found the quality quickly dipped, and I really didn't like the new looks for a lot of the characters. So let's take a look at a few of the other ones that I did buy. So here are some more figures from Playmates line based on the Nickelodeon animated series. So you'll see here I've got Leatherhead. So this is the crocodile or alligator villain of the Turtles, and I really like this look too. It's a lot less corny than maybe the original 80s Leatherhead was, because he was kind of like a Crocodile Dundee, wearing a silly outfit. This guy here, he's pretty literally stripped down, just has the bandages wrapped around his hands and feet, and he looks menacing. Now the only problem with this figure is that in the cartoon, this guy was presented as huge and beastly, which would make sense for a big alligator compared to a turtle. But this guy, if anything, he's shorter than the Ninja Turtle figures because of that hunch. So he's just really undersized, which is really kind of disappointing. And the articulation, it's he still moves at the shoulders, and he's got decent movement there at the thighs, but nothing at the knees, nothing at the shoulder, nothing at the wrist. He turns at the head, and he turns once at the tail. But where the Turtles, which were the first figures released, seemed to showcase that there was going to be a lot more articulation on these figures, they quickly kind of became a letdown. So here's the robotic turtle Metalhead. This is a figure I was really excited about, and I actually put him on my best of list that year that he came out. And I still think he looks great, but the lack of articulation really does kind of hinder my enjoyment of this figure. I still think it's a great look for him. It looks cooler than the vintage Metalhead, I think. But I just wish he moved more. He's got this play feature where you can shoot that projectile out of his hand there. But yeah, so great looking figure, but not a whole lot of playability factor there. And then we got Usagi Yojimbo. So this is a new version of that samurai rabbit that I love. And this is actually much truer to the look of Usagi Yojimbo. And he was a character that was actually, he had his own comic book. He was not created by Eastman and Laird. I'm not sure what arrangement they had to kind of license him out to add him to the Ninja Turtle mythos. But I didn't know any of that either when I was a kid. And I just loved the Samurai Rabbit. So this version, it's much truer to the comic book version, but I would say nearly, not nearly as cool. He's kind of wimpier looking, kind of much rounder and slight. He doesn't have that angry scowl that the vintage toy did. So while I think this figure is neat, I really would have preferred to get an updated version of that original 80s toy. And then I've got Mutagen Man here. So this is a new version of a character from the vintage toy line. And this figure is pretty cool. It's not nearly as detailed as the vintage one. The vintage one had his guts all displayed in this clear canister, and it was all painted. You can see all the different color veins and stuff. This one here, it just really feels like they kind of cheaped out. There's very few paint apps. I feel like this whole body could have looked more interesting instead of like a giant garbage can. Now, the lid does come off, and you can lift his grody little guts out of there. So you can see there's all kinds of organs there. Oops. And I think if they had painted those different colors, he would have been a lot more grotesque and a lot more interesting to look at. But yeah, they opted just to make it solid pink. Now, one thing that is kind of neat about this figure is you can fill that tank with water, and it gives it kind of a cool effect. And he can also, you'll notice he's got these holes on his hand. You can fill him with, I think the water either comes out of his hand or you fill him with ooze, and the ooze can come out of his hand like that. Anyway, it was kind of a neat reimagining of Mutagen Man. But the lack of articulation, again, nothing at the knees or elbows. It just, my interest in this line kind of quickly, waned when I saw these figures they were kind of getting cheaper with them. Now, these are the last 3 figures that I have from the Nickelodeon toy line. And yeah, these were the ones that kind of put the nail in the coffin. Not because they're necessarily terrible figures, but I just realized, Ninja Turtles and all these new characters were just not that important to me, and the designs of the characters weren't as interesting as I hoped they would be. So, like, this guy here was called Cockroach Terminator. As far as I know, he was a new character created for the Nickelodeon series. I don't think he had been in previous iterations. And yeah, just the articulation on him, like his legs have this really odd kind of articulation, makes him have to stand kind of weird with his feet spread out like that. At least he's got some movement in the elbows, which is nice. But yeah, I just didn't really care for the design of this guy. I think I bought him because I was still thinking I was going to try to be a somewhat completist collector of this line, but then I was like, you know what, after these couple guys I realized I was going to get out. This guy here, I actually am blanking on his name right now. So again, I think this was a brand new creation for the new series. I thought he was pretty neat looking. You can see on his chest there, he's got like kind of a skull logo. So he's got kind of a Punisher-esque vibe to him. I didn't see any of the episodes that this guy or that guy were in, so I really don't know much about him. I just thought he was a neat looking figure, but the lack of articulation does kind of limit my excitement about him. And then the last thing I've got here is I thought it was pretty cool that Playmates decided to release a set of 4 turtles in the kind of Eastman and Laird style. So you can see they're kind of scratchy looking with all these, detail. It looks like kind of etching from a pencil. And the turtles were originally, even though they were in black and white, the original intent was that they all had red bandanas. They didn't have the purple, blue. That was a creation of like Archie Comics and the animation. And the only way you could really tell them apart was with their weapons. So I thought it was pretty neat, and I kind of wanted to buy all 4 of them, but they were actually a little too similar, and I just didn't feel like wasting whatever it was, $12 or $13 on 4 nearly identical figures. So I bought one just because I thought it would be neat to have. So I went with Donatello. So you might think this looks like Raphael, but he is Donatello. I've got here's a cover from one of IDW's books, and you'll see there the 4 turtles with their red bandanas and stuff on. So yeah, that's what this one's all about. And it's a cool figure, and again, it has some articulation in the elbows and stuff. And yeah, I kind of wish I bought all 4 of them. But anyway, so that's that. Now, I mentioned earlier that Bebop was my favorite character. So I thought when that Nickelodeon line came out, I was eager to get a new Bebop figure based on it. But by the time those figures came out, I really didn't like the redesign of Bebop. And the figure had very limited paint apps. Like his eyes weren't even painted. And he was really slender, wearing like an all black leather cat suit kind of thing. I really wasn't into it, so I did not buy that toy. Although Playmates did also release these 2 figures of Bebop and Rocksteady, who are kind of Shredder's main mutant henchmen. And these were under a line called, Classics, the Classic Collection. So they did release a couple other characters. And this collection is kind of in the same vein as the Neca figures that I'm about to show you. But the turtle ones looked a lot like the Neca ones, actually. They looked like they were based on the vintage cartoon, and they were pretty nice figures. Now, I don't know why, when it came to Bebop and Rocksteady, they didn't go with the vintage cartoon, nor did they go with the vintage comic book. They just kind of created this whole new look for them, which is kind of a, the basic idea is there, but it's a unique look. And it's not a bad look, especially for Rocksteady. I kind of like this figure. The helmet comes off there. It's a nice sculpt. He's got some nice accessories. But it's just not, a classic Rocksteady, and he doesn't really match any of the turtles I have. And Bebop I'm even more disappointed with. I really don't like this gigantic head and neck. Like, the figure's okay. But, it's just not the way I envision Bebop. So these guys were cool figures, but these are the only two I bought from that Classics line. And I'm really looking forward to getting comic or cartoon accurate versions of these guys from Neca in the near future. Now, these are the upcoming figures of Bebop and Rocksteady from Neca. I've showed these before in past videos, but I just want to remind you of the cool figures we have to look forward to and how closely this figure represents Bebop as he looked in the cartoon. So here's a picture of Bebop from the cartoon, and you can see how spot on that is. And I thought I'd also show you a picture of me as Bebop for Halloween some years ago. So there's a wide shot. I took a couple of close-ups here as well, and I know it's not great. I'm not one of those guys that puts a ton of time and effort into my Halloween costumes, but I was pretty pleased with this one. I even gave myself a purple mohawk, even though it's hard to tell from these images. And there I am with Miguel, who went out as Baxter Stockman. Now here's a couple of oddities I have. So I've got a couple of Funko Pops of Bebop and Leatherhead. And then I've also got this little vinyl figurine from Kid Robot of Bebop. So I bought this thing first, before Funko Pops had really taken off. And I thought it was kind of cool, but it's still not like... I just really don't like the look of these Kid Robot things so much. Like, they're okay. But I really do like Funko Pops. And this is one of the examples where I feel this version of Bebop is the perfect version of Bebop. Like, this is exactly what I want a Bebop figure to look like. Now, I wish it was, an action figure and it was maybe scaled up to actually, work with the Ninja Turtle figures I have. But I think as far as the design aesthetic, like the face, the nose ring, the purple mohawk, the body design, everything there is perfect. I absolutely love this pop figure. It might be the favorite pop figure that I have, and I have lots of them. And Leatherhead, kind of the same idea. So this is him in kind of his silly Crocodile Dundee inspired outfit, but they do it really well. Like, I didn't like on the vintage toys with these guys how like Bebop had like one barefoot kind of poking out or whatever. Like, I just like how clean these figures are, and these guys just look really great. So great job by Funko on those things there. Now here's a fun oddity that I'm excited to show you on video, because I've taken pictures of this guy on Instagram before, but that doesn't really do him justice. My best friend Miguel is from Mexico, so every time he goes home, I ask him to keep his eyes peeled for shitty knockoff action figures, because I get a real kick out of them. I'll just show you a couple of the ones that he's brought me in the past. So here is a Captain America, and as you can see, it is horribly awesome. Here is, I guess, a Spider-Man. See, it's Spider-Man with Batman wings, and I don't even know. It's like a weird hang glider thing going on here. Anyway, I love stupid Mexican toys. So this Ninja Turtle, he actually doesn't even look that bad. Like, you might think, oh, his paint job's a little spotty. The fact that he's made out of translucent plastic is pretty cool. So you can see he's kind of see-through. But what really makes this guy neat is his rave effect here. So you push this button, and he lights up. And the more you push it, he has got different modes. I think there's maybe 3 of them. Anyway, it's pretty cool. This is exactly the kind of junk I love from Mexico. So thank you, Miguel, for this guy. Now here's one I almost forgot to show you. I forgot I had him for a second. This here is a jumbo reproduction of the vintage Playmates Bebop that I got rid of. So you can see how big he is. And he is, I'd say, more than 12 inches tall, maybe about 14, 15. And I did not know that they made these things. I actually just got this guy maybe a little over a year ago at a yard sale on my street. And yeah, I did not know they made these reproductions of the vintage figures. And the thing is, there's kind of a trend with doing that. Like you'll see up here, I've got a vintage Beastman still in his packaging. And if I spin around over here, I've got a jumbo Snake Eyes and a jumbo Walrus Man. It's a bit of a trend to remake jumbo versions of 80s toys. But when I came across this, I think the date on it is, there it is, 1990, Mirage Studios Playmates Toys. So if this thing came out in 1990, that's when the vintage line was still growing pretty strong and before this trend of jumbo-sized vintage toys had started. So yeah, this was a pretty cool find because, as I mentioned, I was kind of disappointed that I did get rid of my vintage Bebop. So yeah, this guy is pretty cool. Okay, so now let's finally move on to the figures that inspired me to do this video. So these are the brand new figures from Neca. So Neca has the rights to do action figures based on the live action movies of the 80s, 90s, and of the animated series. Now, Playmates is actually still making Ninja Turtle figures as well, and they're doing more like the mass retail type of figures, which is based on the current animated series called Rise of Ninja Turtles. And Super 7 is another company that has the rights to do Ninja Turtle figures, and they are doing 5 points of articulation vintage Star Wars style figures, along with 6-inch detailed figures based on the vintage toy line. And also, who's a DC Collectibles is doing a line of Ninja Turtle figures based on their Batman vs. Ninja Turtle movie. So there is lots of current Ninja Turtles, and that doesn't even count the like Funko Pop and vinyl type figures. So it's hard to know what to collect, and I really wasn't sure I was gonna get all on board with these NECA animated style figures. So when the sets went up for pre-order at my local EB Games, I went with this pack. And I was fortunate that Leo is the guy that was packaged with Shredder, because Leo is my favorite of the Turtles. But of all the figures, I thought Shredder was the coolest looking one. Because I would have been content without getting any of the Turtles over again, because I like my vintage Playmates Turtles, and I like the kind of 2012 version of the Turtles. But Shredder, I don't think has ever had a great figure. I did not like the vintage Playmates figure who was kind of hunched over and bare-chested. And the one from 2012, he was too small and he was too spiky. This guy looks fantastic. This is the Shredder figure that I always wished I had. This is the one that's probably the closest to the paper one I made way back in like 1987. So yeah, really cool figure, and I like it a lot. Now, I did a whole review on these guys on one of my separate videos, so I'm not going to dwell on them too much. But in that video, I had opened them on that video, and I had commented about how now that I have them open, I really do wish I had pre-ordered the rest, because I was really impressed with the quality of these things. And I asked the guys at my EB Games, and they said they didn't have any more expected, so that was kind of a bummer. But then I guess somebody returned all their sets, so my EB Games called me and told me that they had all of them set aside for me. So let me plop them up here for a second. So there you see Donatello and Krang. There's Michelangelo and a foot soldier. And there is Raphael and another foot soldier. So you can see the artwork on the packaging is pretty much the same. They've got unique artwork for each of the characters. Even the foot soldier figures, which I believe are identical, the artwork is a little different for each one. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, like I said, I've been sitting on these guys for a week waiting to open them up because I wanted to show you guys them in their packaging. But now I'm ready to tear into them, so let's do that. Okay, I've got everything open, and that was fucking brutal, you guys. That just took me like 20 minutes to get all the twist ties off of those things. But anyway, I've got them all open, and there's some really cool accessories in there. So I figured I might as well make this review as complete as possible, and I should remind you of the accessories I got with these two guys. So there they were. I got multiple extra hands for Shredder, so there's 4 extra hands there for various poses and holding things. Leonardo had a couple of extra hands, which are this kind of flat palmed hand, so he could karate chop stuff. He had a turtle communicator, which was pretty cool. And then Shredder had a little communicator as well, with Krang's face on there, which is pretty cool. And he came with a canister of ooze. So those are all the accessories I got with this pack. So the next pack I want to show you is the Michelangelo and the Foot Soldier pack, because I think it might be my favorite, just based on the accessories alone. So first off, here's the Foot Soldier. And this is what the Foot Soldier looked like in the old cartoon and in the vintage toy line. Kind of hunched back like that, which I don't love. And also it's a little confusing because they've got flesh-colored hands, which implies that these might be people. I don't remember what the hands were like on the vintage toy, because the Foot Soldiers were always robots in the cartoon, and that gave the turtles an opportunity to, slice them up with their swords and stuff. I think in the comic book they were all people, and in the live-action movies the Foot Soldiers were all people. But the cartoons on which these are based, they're robots. So I suppose they could be robots with fleshy-looking hands, and maybe that's accurate. I don't remember. But anyway, the toy looks pretty accurate to how I remember the characters looking from the old show and from the old toy. So for his accessories, he's got this pretty crazy gun, which looks like it's got a plunger on the end. And as you can see, the hands he's got there now, he's got closed fists, so it doesn't look like he would hold that. But he has a couple of holding hands, as well as a couple of open palm karate chop hands as well. So you can swap all those out. Now here's Mikey. Now he looks to be pretty much the same construction as Leo. And it looks like these turtles are all the same color. Which, even though that's different than my 1988 toys and my 2012 toys, that might have been accurate to the cartoon, because I think they actually were all the same shade of green in the cartoon. So, yeah, I imagine sculpt-wise, other than the different belt buckle, these guys look like they're probably the exact same. Now, the head sculpts are different, and that's the main thing that matters. So you see Leo's got the teeth on both sides of his head, whereas Mikey's only showing teeth on one side, and it's just kind of a scowl on the other side. I would have liked to seen Mikey maybe a little happier, since this is based on the cartoon where he was, the party dude. So just for a little, diversity, I think a big smile might have been nice from this guy. Now for accessories for him, so like I said, that's where he really shines. So he's got a couple of extra hands, and these are just thumbs up hands, so he can do like a good old cowabunga, which is pretty cool. And I'm sure all the hands are interchangeable for all these turtles, especially since they're all the same color. So where I have karate chop hands for Leo, I could put them on him, and so it's nice to have all these variety of hands. I could have Leo giving the thumbs up. Now he's also got a turtle communicator, but unlike Leo's, his is open. So you just see the difference there. So whereas this is closed up, this is what it looks like once it pops open. So it's got these two little antennas. So that's a pretty neat little piece. And he's also got this turtle grappling hook. You can see there's some rope and it's taped up right now. But that's a pretty cool accessory as well. It looks like these probably open up. There's hooks on the side. So they've used that in the series. So yeah, that's great. So he holds this end, I guess, and throws this up to the top of buildings to scale up there. So super cool accessory. Now here are the best things. So he's got two nunchucks, and they have an actual metal chain in there. So he can really swing them around there. And that's just really great. It's so much better than the stiff, all one piece of plastic from the vintage toy, or even this one here from the cheap Mexican toy. It's just one piece with they don't really spin or anything like that. So this is a big improvement as far as nunchucks go. So he's got two of those. But what I was kind of surprised to find in the package, it was tucked in behind Michelangelo, is this accessory here. And so I'm guessing maybe, I'm not quite sure how it works. Let's see here. Bear with me. I maybe should have figured this stuff out before I started filming, but yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's a way it attaches to him, but you'll see here, so there's just a little knob there, so it looks like it should maybe attach to the nunchuck. So I'm not sure if that gray part slides off the nunchuck, but I don't want to break it right now. But you hold that, and then this spins. So it gives the effect of him swinging a nunchuck around, which is really cool. So yeah, that's Michelangelo and the Foot Soldier. So let's bring the next set out here. So we'll take a look at the other Foot Soldier. So I think he's the exact same. You might as well be, because these are the kind of things that some collectors would want to army build, because there was dozens of these guys, whole armies of them. So why not have more than one? There was really no need for Neca to invest the dollars to make a whole new sculpt for these guys when they're supposed to be the same. But it's nice that they gave him some unique accessories. So he's got a bunch of interchangeable hands. Oops. I don't have much room to work here, so yeah. So he's got a bunch of interchangeable hands as well. Probably the same hands as the other guy. But then he has a couple of different weapons rather than the big plunger weapon. He's got this little laser pistol there, which has got multiple paint apps on it. It's pretty nice looking. Nice sculpt. And he's also got this big rifle as well. So some nice accessories. And yeah, I didn't get into it too much, but articulation wise, you can see this guy's got double jointed knees, so he can get his leg back there really good. He's articulated at the ankle, look kind of a swivel ankle, so you can get good poses there. Ball jointed shoulders, swivels at the elbow. At the wrist, he turns, and there's a joint there, so you can turn his hands inward. Head, yeah, I think it's ball jointed, so yeah, he can look up a little bit, and side to side. There's a swivel at the waist there. So yeah, lots of good movement on these guys. So he was packaged with Raph. So here's Raph. Now he's got a similar look to Michelangelo, except his teeth are shown on the opposite side. Now in the same way I kind of wish Michelangelo was happier, I kind of wish Raphael was madder. Not that he was all that angry in the cartoon, but he has historically, in pretty much every version of the Ninja Turtles, been the angry loner. So he might have been a good one to give like a little extra angry look to. So yeah. Same stuff. Looks to be the same body. The only real difference that I can tell is the R on the belt buckle. Everything else looks to be pretty much the same. Now one thing I am noticing on him is I don't know if he has anywhere to store his size. Like Leonardo had the straps there for his swords. Does Mikey? No, Mikey doesn't have anything either. So that's unfortunate. Yeah, so nowhere to store his size. However, he does have a couple of size. So we got those weapons there as well, and they look great. As well as a couple extra hands. So these are, I don't know, they look like kind of pointing hands, or grabbing hands, I'm not sure. Or maybe that's so he can properly hold his sai. I guess that would make sense. How it's, yeah, held between his fingers like that, so that's kind of cool. And he also came with a piece of pizza. So, of course. So the last set is Donatello and Krang. So here's Donatello. Again, nothing we haven't seen already. Looks to be pretty much the same build and the same like paint apps, same color skin. Now his head here, no teeth showing from Donatello, so he's got the most kind of neutral expression on his face. He does have somewhere to store his bow staff. So I'm not sure why they gave that to my two guys and they didn't give it to Doug's two guys, but yeah, nice looking figure. For accessories, he came with some gripping hands. So they must be different size grip than the gripping hands he's got. At a glance, I don't really see the difference, but then he also came with the two turtle communicators. So he's got a closed one and an open one. And of course, his bow staff. So let's see if that fits in there okay. I don't want to force it here, but yeah, it might take a little bit. It took me a little time to wrestle Leo's swords into his pack, but yeah, I'm sure it will fit in there if I mess around with it for a little bit. But it should fit into his hands okay there. Yeah. So there you go. There's Donnie and his bow staff. And so now Krang. So here is Krang. He's kind of uneventful himself. He's articulated at the tendril. Yeah. Oh. So yeah, there's a ball joint there, as you can see, since I just popped one out of its socket. So they do move around a little bit. They're kind of stiff. The sculpted detail is nice. He's pretty small. Now for his little carrying case, or his body, it's very similar to what we got in the vintage toy line. So the glass case pops open. He fits in there. And I've probably moved him in such a way so that he doesn't fit properly anymore. But yeah, so I assume this closes around him. It looks like it's actually meant that his arms would poke out the side by the way that's sculpted. So yeah, I might have to mess around with that to get him to fit in there properly. But it's pretty cool. There's not much to it. It's pretty simple in design. But I like the paint on it. It looks animated. It's got joints at the knee so it can kind of go forward and backward. I really like those kind of three-toed feet, and they spin around. He does seem to stand up okay. And the only accessory he came with is this thing, and I don't know what it is. It's probably a key item from the cartoon that I'm just not remembering right now. I don't see anywhere where it attaches to this thing. There's no so I don't know. Maybe it's something he wears on his head. I don't know. If you know, you can let me know in the comments. But there you go. So that is my Wave 1 Ninja Turtle assortment from Neca. So a lot of cool stuff and some really great designs. So I'm very happy with them. So I think I've run on long enough, so I'm going to wrap this up. And before I wrap this up, I just want to show you a couple things I figured out after I stopped filming. So I've got Raphael holding his sai, and I didn't realize at the time that the pizza actually has a little hole in it, so he can kind of just stab the pizza, which is kind of cool. As for Krang, you have to take his arms off in order for that lid to close, and then you plug his arms in here, so it looks like he's reaching through. And so that's kind of neat looking. And lastly, I did figure out that one of Michelangelo's nunchucks, the little gray part did come off, and that's how you attach it. So now I can actually have Michelangelo doing his spinning effect. So that is my entire Ninja Turtle collection. I hope you enjoyed my little tour through my turtles. So if you did, please like the video below, subscribe to the channel, and please leave me your comments. I always love hearing from you guys. And yeah, until next time, thanks a lot for watching, and see you later.